Hey everyone, I'm Clayfact, and today we're going to make a Hydra, a serpent-like monster that is known in the Greek mythology. It is described very differently, sometimes in 3 heads, other times 6, and most of the time 9. And of course, I chose 9, because I just like to torture myself. So let's see if I can make this monster cute while I tell you a bit about them. Now let's get started. The first thing I started doing was playing around with some eyes in order to make the 9 heads. The thing is with heads and sculptures, the more heads you add, the more scary it actually looks. It's just human nature, I guess, that we find that creepy. So in order to remedy that, I decided to make each head with its own unique personality and expression. Also, it would be more fun. It would also help me in the long run, because it is very difficult when you make something handmade to make it consistent. And the more heads, the more difficult it will be. But you can sort of hide it and disguise it in the expressions. It's sort of a Disney method. The face keeps changing depending on what expression the character has. I also picked the eyes depending on what sort of expression I wanted that face to have. And I did give it a lot of thought, maybe too much, but this is actually the most challenging sculpture that I have ever made to date. It has challenged all my abilities, all my techniques. The only thing that I didn't use here was fur. And thank God for that, because I would have given up if I did that. But I actually really enjoyed this sculpture throughout, and I just am so happy with it. Even now when I'm trying to give it sort of an underbite, again to emphasize the cuteness. To help me make these heads look like they were on the same creature, there were some ground rules that I put for myself. Like the noses had to be the same, the underbite had to be the same, the volume of cheeks has to be the same, and the level of eyebrows had to be the same. So I did that while changing heads interchangeably just to make them more uniform, while still giving them a different expression. Now on 2 of the heads I actually cut half of the head off, so to speak the bottom head. And it was because I sculpted the jaw separately, because they needed to have something in their mouth or have a little bit of an open mouth. But while I keep playing around with the expression, why don't I tell you a bit about the Hydra? But before I get started, a quick disclaimer for ya. I am not an expert in any way in Greek mythology or Greek. I am simply a girl with Google. So please don't come for me. And now with that said, let me tell you about the Hydra, or more commonly known, the Hydra of Lernaean. It is the offspring of Echidna and Typhon, which make it pretty much the offspring of the monster king and queen in Greek mythology, as far as I understand. And make it that the Cerberus and the Chimera actually is its siblings. Though, from what I can understand, it doesn't have a close sibling relationship or a mother-father relationship actually, since they gave the little Hydra to Zeus's wife Hera, that trained the monster to attack everything on sight, which in my perspective doesn't make for a very good monster owner, now does it? Especially because the Hydra's blood, the Hydra's saliva, and even the Hydra's breath was very toxic and venomous. That, combined with it almost being completely immortal, unless you cut the biggest head off, made it for a very dangerous creature. The Hydra ends up being slain by Hercules and his cousin. And I don't want to go into too much details on the fight, but every time Hercules cut a head off, until he hit the immortal head. 2 heads would grow back. Plus, Hera also flew a giant crab monster into the mix, so it was quite of a fight. But that is what I know about the Greek mythology Hydra. Now, let's get back to the sculpture, where I very fittingly am making 2 angry looking Hydra heads, but don't worry, they are not angry at us. They're just having a little debate with themselves. I will show you later. I just had so much fun making the different expressions and come up with different ideas for each head. I will encourage everyone to try to make a Hydra. Your hands will never be the same. It's quite the experience, but it is so gratifying when it's done. You know what? Scratch that. I challenge everyone to try to make a Hydra. No matter your skill level, just level down in heads. 3, 6 heads, 9 heads, doesn't matter. Try to make a Hydra. It is so fun. But with the faces finally done, I moved on to make tiny spikes. Because, of course, I wanted the Hydra to have tiny spikes. I may have been inspired by the Disney's Hercules, but I also tried to do my own way. And I think I succeeded. I think it's a very clear sculpture. Now, for the ears, I decided that even though it was a serpent, I wanted it to have ears to help with the cuteness. So I used a triangle marker cap I had to again make the ears just as consistent as I wanted the underbite and the nose to be. But with the ears in place and the head thingies on, it was finally time to bake the heads. And I think it was about here that I actually got really overwhelmed. Because one thing is to make 9 heads, the other thing is to place them and make them look good. Also because when I did my research and found reference photos and tried to see if there was any tutorial on how to make 9 heads and make them look good, I didn't find anything. So I guess this is the first tutorial on how to make 9 heads look good. I just winged it and tried head by head to make it look sort of natural. And I think I succeeded. But the amateur was definitely the most difficult part of it all. I thought that it would be making 9 heads look consistent, but no. Making it sturdy enough and making sure that it's sort of all fit together was the most difficult part. I even borrowed a metal thingy I hope Mr. Clefect is not going to miss to make it more sturdy and make sure that it wasn't going to tip over. Every step of the way with this figure, I had to overthink it, so to speak, with the pros and the cons, because there was just nothing easy about it. And I love every moment of it, but yeah, it is really a challenge. But with the amateur finally done, I started putting clay on the body. And while I do that, why don't we look at the Hydra with Clefect eyes? Because I think it's an incredibly misunderstood creature. First off, we can't judge anybody because they have bad breath, can we? And that its blood is poisonous isn't really its fault, is it now? Plus, if we look at the upbringing, can we really fault it for being a bit territorial and aggressive? I surely can't. Lake Lernaean was its home, and the fish in that lake was probably the only meal it had. And I don't know about you, but if a stranger came into my house without introducing themselves or anything and just opened up my fridge and started drinking my milk, then I would have a problem with it. I would ask what's going on. So in my perspective, we can't really blame the Hydra for trying to get people away from its place. And about Hercules, from the Greek mythology stories I have read, Hercules had a temper of his own. I mean, he murdered his wife and kids. Now, that's not a good guy. So who's to say that it was Hercules that was the hero here? Maybe it actually was the Hydra. Now think about that. if the Hydra did know that about Hercules, maybe that is why it was so aggressive. So if we combine that knowledge with the knowledge of its upbringing and the fact that it must be very, very difficult to have 9 opinions at the same time, all the time, I actually think that it's a little hero. Yeah. It just tries to do its best with the cards it had been dealt. And that is what I think about the Hydra and its backstory. Now back to the sculpture. With clay finally on his body and some of his toe pads done, I switched over and worked on his stomach to give it some details. So give it a traditional dragon tummy, just to try to keep it balanced with not too overly details because the head has so much expression, and not a totally blank slate. And after that I worked on the necks. Now the necks was very difficult and a lot of time consuming, but I think I actually managed. I am very, very happy with how it turns out. And with the necks on, I could finally start to poke some holes before I covered it in some baking bond. And why am I doing that? Well, to give it texture, of course. I'm using some texture foam tools that Mr. Perfect has made me to give this scaly look, and I'm just happy with how it came out. I can't really describe it to you because it was just some foam that we had laying about that he made it of, but it looks amazing, especially combined with the Polymerclay adhesives that you see me brush on. And I just worked my way with the neck, first poking it, then brushing it, and then adding the doodads. And I was just so happy at that point. I felt like every spike I put on just had to bring the character together and make it a cohesive piece. And I was so happy. It was so oddly satisfying to do that. And with the necks all done, all I had to do was do exactly the same with the body. With things like that, you just have to go head on. You know, because there's none heads. Oh no, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I think I'm heading in the wrong direction. Oh no, I will stop. I'm all up in my head. But with the body done, it was finally baked, and now I think it's time for a head roundup. Let me tell you about them. So let's start up with Bo. Bo is a happy boy, and even though he doesn't have much for brains, there's not much going on there. He is one of the more gentle heads. The same for Bird and Bree, though they are a little more clever and they are very curious. They get along well together and explore a lot when they get the chance. Then there's Brutus, that is sort of the leader of the pack. And if there is a mortal head, then it is Brutus. He is a bit of a know-it-all, but everybody likes him and everybody listens to him. When it comes to care and a gentle nature, then we have Belle. She's a very kind soul and just loves to snuggle. She gets along with everyone. Then we are on to Bebop. And Bebop has his bear. He's a very playful boy, never get tired of it, and brings a lot of fun into the mix, which is necessary because down under we have Brianna and Brittany. Now, they argue all the time. Nobody knows what they're arguing about, but there's always some sort of drama with those two. And last but not least, we have Bruno. And that is pretty much it for the heads. Now let's move on to the painting. Now, if you don't like this purple base color, then you can blame Disney, because no matter how I try to imagine the Hydra, it always came out purple, so that was what I was going for. Though I dry brushed him in what I hope is more a silver-like tone, just to make the texture that I worked so hard on stand out, before I painted all his little spikes. It took a lot of time and challenged me in patience and in trying to get in very weird places when it came to the head spikes. I would still say it's a worthy challenge, and if you want to challenge yourself, you definitely should do it. But oh my god, I'm not a big fan of painting, and this was so difficult. Now, to make sure that it wasn't a confusing, muting, purple rainbow I tried to paint, I painted the ears the same colors as the spikes to make it more cohesive. Now, with all the bases finally down, I worked on the stomach. I painted the stomach blue and I gave it a little darker blue wash just to give it some more dimension. It's nothing you're going to look much at, but it's there and I like it's complete, so to speak. With the stomach painted, I moved on to put some wash on the faces, again to give it a bit more definition. Now, while I do that, why don't I take the time to ask you to like, comment and subscribe if you hadn't already done so. I mean, I really hope I have earned your subscription by now by giving a tutorial in 9 heads. 9 guys, I mean, come on, it is pretty cool. Now, back to the sculpture and back to the teddy bear that I'm painting. With Bebop's teddy bear and Bo's tongue, there's not really much to say because I didn't give it that much detail, and it was actually on purpose because there was already so much going on with the heads that I didn't want it to be too confusing to look at. But with all the heads done, all I had to do was clean 18 eyes. I loved making this sculpture. It really put me in my A game because it was so challenging every step of the way. But that being said, I have to admit, I'm a little bit tired of it, guys. Next time that I'm making a sculpture, I think it's only going to have one head and it's going to be like that for a while, if that's okay with you. Please say it is. But with the final eyes cleaned, I think that is it for this sculpture and it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I don't know about you, but I am in love with this Hydra. I think it came out super great. I'm just so happy with it. Not to pat myself too much on the back, but come on! The facial expressions, the movement of the neck, it's awesome! But with that being said, it's time for me to sign off. I hope to see you next time, but if you can't wait until next time, why not click on the square to your right? Then you can see Windy, the Wendigo, get made. But until then, bye!